It's never fun to lose. I thought we got a pretty good look out of it. But again, I think, we shouldn't have been in that position to begin with. The 17 turnovers got us there. So, yeah, we shouldn't have even been there. But I thought, Kelsey got a look at it. It's unfortunate, but, yeah, on to the next.
Stephanie White, I've had it up to here with you. I've had it up to here. I know you are going to take zero accountability as all.
Ladies and gentlemen, we have just witnessed one of most annoying shows of coaching incompetence in recent WNBA history. And I'm completely sick of pretending that Stephanie White isn't a big concern for the Indiana Fever team. Last night's 81-80 loss to Dallas Wings was not only disappointing defeat, it was a tutorial on how poor coaching decisions can utterly ruin a talent roster, wasting opportunities that should never let it slip away.
We fell down 14 points to a team that had 8 wins on the goddamn season.
Everyone wants to blame referees for this calamity. Believe me, the officiating was completely rubbish. The true culprit is seated right there on the sideline with the Fever uniform, refusing to accept any accountability for the system failures that cost Indiana a win. Play against one of the worst teams in the league.
Guys, that's on the coach. Look, if you want to continue to defend this coach, go right ahead. My defense of hers, nah. I was thinking earlier today, what would it take for Stephanie White to get me on her side? She'd have to win the...
Smash the like button and leave fire White in the comments, because what I am going to break down will have you are wondering how this woman still has a position coaching professional basketball. Let's start with the most obvious difficulty nobody appears to want to discuss, which is Stephanie White's complete unable to prepare her team for critical stretches of basketball games. The sickness allowed Dallas to go on a 21-3 run in the third quarter at home against a team that entered the game with 8 victories and 24 losses. Think about that for a second. You're playing in front of your own fans against one of the league's bottom teams, and you give up a 21-3 run that essentially determines the results before the fourth quarter even starts.
I just watched one of the biggest puke fest I've ever seen in my entire life. You know what should never happen? A 21-3 run at home by the opposing team on you, when the opposing team is the Dallas Wings and they're not any good. I mean, seriously, what just happened during this game? Once again, the Indiana Fever come out into a third quarter and they got embarrassed.
That is not a case of players making mistakes. That is not terrible luck. That's coaching. High-level malpractice. When your squad emerges from halftime looking totally unprepared and gets completely devastated for an entire a quarter, falls firmly on the head coach who is supposed to have them ready to compete. The most frustrating part about this coaching disaster, how Stephanie has made things more predictable. White's leadership. This is not the first. The Fever has come out flat in crucial moments. It is not the second time. It has become their calling card. Under her supervision, every game, you can depend on Indiana to have at least one quarter where they look completely lost and disorganized, outmatched by teams they should be dominating.
When we have a coach that allows the Dallas Wings to go on a 19-0 run without making any adjustments, without calling a timeout, Dallas Wings 19-0 run. When we have all of these factors working against us, it's going to be very hard to win games.
Last night, it was the third quarter against Dallas. However, we've seen this movie before against Chicago, against Atlanta, against everybody. Teams should be asking for mercy against this talented roster. When the same problems keep occurring, you can't keep blaming they are no longer players. You need to look at the coaching staff is failing to put. They are in a position to succeed. What makes it's even more frustrating to listen to Stephanie White's post-game press. During the meeting, she managed to blame everyone and everything but hers Coaching for this humiliating defeat.
She.
We talked about turnovers. She complained about the officiating. She mentioned that all of their point guards have been injured. She tossed each excuse at the wall. Hopefully something will stick. But what? You didn't hear one instant of responsibility. She admitted that. Perhaps her coaching decisions contributed to the calamity. When a reporter inquired what went wrong during the disastrous third quarter, White immediately began chatting concerning protective attention to detail and players are acting out of character, totally deflecting from her own responsibility to prepare the team, organized and...
Let's see if Stephanie White takes any accountability for how this game played out. And we know she probably won't.
Just had a lead in the middle of the third quarter, and then that big Dallas run was the difference. What did you see go sideways in that stretch?
Well, I didn't think our attention to detail on defense was very good. They got loose for some easy ones. We started fouling, getting to the free throw line, and turning the ball over. I mean, there were moments where, there's no transition defense for turnovers for scores. And, we had multiple in a row. I mean, 27 points off of turnovers. And, I felt like our group did some uncharacteristic things with the ball in our hands, and it led to easy buckets.
The excuses are becoming increasingly offensive against the real coaching performance, because at least lousy coaching can fixed with greater preparation and adjustments. When a coach refuses to accept their faults and continue repeating the same mistakes week after week, that's when you realize you have fundamental leadership issue that goes beyond X's and O's.
Is any of this your fault, Stephanie White? Is any of this your fault? Or are you about to sit here and pass the buck to each player individually to make it seem like you have no part in this?
Stephanie White keeps discussing players are acting out of character, but these are not atypical at all. They are the exact same difficulties. We've seen this all season. Aliyah Boston is still not sure how to establish a position in the post.
Kelsey
Mitchell is still over-dribbling and getting tunnel vision. Natasha Howard is still attempts to move the ball up the court like
she's a point guard.
These are not new issues. They are coaching failures, have been ignored for several months.
And we have quarters and halves where we come out not ready to play. We come out making no adjustments. We come out slow, lethargic. The Dallas Wings went on a 19-0 run, and we're sitting there. Wait, did we call a timeout? Was there a timeout called during this 12-0 run? No, there wasn't. Oh, okay. Just making sure. 12-0 run turned into a 19-0 run, turned into a 21-3 run.
The timeout management. The closing seconds wonderfully captures everything wrong with Stephanie White's game management and decision-making process. With the fever reduced by 1 point and have a chance to win the game, White waited for 1.7 seconds left on the clock before phoning timeout, basically eliminating any possibility of running an appropriate play or taking a careful look at the basket. The competent coach calls a timeout with there are at least 3 or 4 seconds left, providing their team with multiple possibilities. The capability to really execute something meaningful. Rather, she waited until the very last possible. Kelsey Mitchell was forced into a despairing heave that had no hope of
going in.
That is not unlucky.
That's
ineffective coaching that directly impacted to losing a basketball game that was winnable. However, the timeout calamity was only a cherry on top of a coaching performance that contained awful rotations, questionable replacement patterns, and absolute inability to make modifications. Dallas began taking control of the game.
Aliyah Boston, 14 points, 5 boards. She got dominated by Lee from 3. Leah Yuru dominated AB. Leah Yuru dropped 20 points on AB's head top.
Didn't you say you were turning Aliyah Boston into the Joker and being this hub, playing at the top of the key, being a hub and a decision maker? Why wasn't she hubbing her ass around and making plays and dominating the backup big Lee Yuru who tore her?
Chloe Bibby came off the bench, immediately made 3 3-pointers. The first half demonstrating exactly the kind of energy and firing the fever required. Differentiate themselves from a struggling the Wings team. How did Stephanie White reward this outstanding performance?
By
I scarcely played BBY in the second half, effectively removing her from the rotation when Indiana needed to score most. This is the kind of rotation management makes you question if the coach actually watches the same game like everyone else in the arena.
the
Defensive strategies were equally perplexing. Stephanie White is supposed to be some sort of defensive genius, according to her supporters, saw her squad get absolutely roasted by gamers who should not be able to score freely against any decent defense system. Lee Weru is a backup center who barely plays significant minutes for Dallas. Came off the bench and overpowered Aliyah Boston in the paint as if she were playing against high school competition.
I just described all this, but the turnovers, only 15 assists. What kind of led to the disorganization that you saw on the offensive end tonight?
Well, all of our point guards are injured. I think that's the first thing. And again, it's one of those things. Dallas turned up the pressure. I mean, defensively, they made it a little bit more difficult for us to bring down the ball and initiate offense, and became a little bit more disruptive. And we're working Odyssey into what we do, but still, it's tough because point guards are the ones who get you organized. And there were times where we weren't organized. There were times where we were over.
When the purported defensive anchor, a bench player, is working him over from one of the league's weakest clubs, that's a coaching problem that requires immediate attention and modification. Instead, White simply watched it unfold and thought things would suddenly improve without making any significant adjustments. The most significant moment in the post-game news conference occurred when White was asked about taking accountability for team problems. She couldn't even admit that maybe her coaching has to do with the team's performance was dismal. Instead, she preferred to blame the circumstances, opponents, for problems that obviously arise from preparation to game management issues. When your team concedes 27 scores off turnovers and you counter with discussing how Dallas made stuff challenging, you're essentially admitting that you had no plan for coping with pressure. You've also admitted that you could not make the necessary modifications to stop the bleeding. But wait, it gets even better. White had the audacity to say that players were doing uncharacteristic things as if we hadn't been watching the same trash all season. Lengthy. Uncharacteristic. Ladies, are you watching the same games as? What about the rest of us? Aliyah Boston has been playing the same style all year, camping near the top of the key instead of creating post-roll as the legitimate center should.
Kelsey
Mitchell has been over-dribbling since day one, treating the basketball like it is plastered to her hands. Natasha Howard has attempted to run point guard duty since the season began, looking lost whenever she touches the ball outside the paint. These are not uncharacteristic behaviors. This is systematic coaching. Failures that were disregarded for months while White pretends that everything is fine. The pattern of excuses and deflection have become the distinctive feature of Stephanie White's time as head coach. Is exactly why does this team constantly underperforming, despite having one of the most skilled rosters inside the league? Every loss comes with a new set of reasons regarding why it wasn't actually her fault, whether it is injury, officiating, or players not. When executed properly, there is always someone else is to blame.
But here is
Coach White devised a revolutionary concept. Good coaches find ways to win anyway. Those challenges, they make modifications that place their athletes in a position succeed. They accept responsibility when their decisions do not work out.
White
Does none of these things. Rather, she chose to pass the buck, hoping that talent alone will eventually bail her out. In circumstances that require better guidance, this could have been completely avoided. The nerve for this woman to sit in that press conference and pretend she's some kind The victim of circumstances is utterly mind-blowing. You'd like to discuss about uncharacteristic? How about A professional basketball coach refuses to own her own errors? What about a supposed defensive guru? Which team recently conceded 81 points to A? Dallas team couldn't score on A. Most nights is your middle school team together?
How
About someone who is hired to create strategic judgments but consistently. Strategic judgments but consistently. Makes decisions that harm her team. Chances of winning? What's truly uncharacteristic for someone who is supposed to operate at the greatest level of women's professional basketball? Offensive execution. Crunch time is perfectly represented. White's failure to design plays that maximize her team's strengths and put pressure on opposition defenders.
with the
game on the line and the need for a basket, tie or gain the lead, the Fever ran absolutely nothing. Resembles an organized offensive set. Kelsey Mitchell. I ended up dribbling sideways for several seconds before initiating a contested, a three-pointer that was never realistic. Chance of getting in. Those are not players. Failure to execute. That is coaching. Staff that failed to prepare the necessary end. Same scenarios and left their best. Players must figure things out on their own when it counted the most. But sure, let us blame the players for not being telepathic enough to read White's thinking about the play she wanted them to perform. Perhaps if she drew something coherent rather than hoping Mitchell would magically generate a miracle, the outcome might have been different. The Indiana's best offense. The alternative in a critical moment was to give the ball to Kelsey and pray informs you
everything you should know about the
level of preparedness and strategic thinking from the coaching staff. This is professional basketball and not a pickup game at the neighborhood gym. Yet, White's end-of-game management would make a high school JV coach is ashamed.
what
Makes this coaching failure even more. It is unacceptable that the Fever were play at home against a Dallas team that came in having lost 5 consecutive
games.
This Dallas team is desperate. They needed someone to hand them the victory. This should have been the type of game. Superior preparation and coaching establishes a healthy margin early on, retains it throughout the competition. Instead, Indiana downplayed their competition. They permitted an inferior team to decide the speed and style of
Play.
They eventually lost a game. Should have been a straightforward victory for any effectively coached team. Championship hopes. But let's not forget the wonderful irony of White calling this Dallas team really well coached when going out. They coached her in her own building. Chris Coughlin's an instructor for most individuals. Couldn't choose from a lineup merely. I strolled into Gamebridge Fieldhouse. Stephanie White received a masterclass in game management and strategic adjustments. If that isn't embarrassing, if you're a professional coach, then maybe it's time to pursue a new career.
The White is able to sit with a
Keep a straight face and compliment Dallas. Coaching after being worked over by. They illustrate how out of touch she is with reality. Roster construction. Because usage challenges extend beyond only one game that represents a fundamental misunderstanding about how to enhance the talent is available on this Indiana team. Stephanie White continues to play. Players are out of position. Fails to create distinct roles that allow everyone may achieve and make substitution decisions that appear designed to disrupt any momentum a team might be forming. When Chloe Bibby gets hot from three-point range, immediately removed from the game. When Aliyah Boston continued to struggling in the post without any make modifications to help her succeed.
when
The defensive strategies regularly leave. Players are in vulnerable positions.
those
Are coaching decisions that directly impact on winning and losing. The most, the annoying element of witnessing this coaching tragedy unfolds is recognizing that Caitlin Clark will eventually return from her groin injury to discover the same systematic problems that existed prior. She got harmed. Throughout the season I heard about how the team figured out how to play without their superstar. How her injury was a blessing in camouflage that enabled other players to develop.
But what we saw last
night was a team that is yet unable execute basic defensive principles. Still turns the ball over at vital moments, but still lacks the type of an organizational framework that championship teams require.
Clark's
Return may disguise some of these issues temporarily, but underlying coaching issues will persist until someone has courage to confront them directly.
the
Stephanie White applies a double standard, gets rated in relation to other coaches around the league is definitely mind-blowing when you contemplate her track record and the resources she has been given the opportunity to succeed in Indianapolis. This is a coach who ran Vanderbilt program into the ground and watched her best players transfer out because I couldn't deal with her system, leadership style. Yet she has been given a pass by the media front office despite routinely making the same mistakes and demonstrating them. Failure to adapt and improve. Other coaches are sacked for considerably less. White continues to skate by with excuses, decreased expectations that don't match the talent level on her roster. Looking forward to the remainder of the season, the Fever cannot afford to continue declining. Coaching leads to winnable games, actions that jeopardize their playoff positioning and championship aspirations. Every loss for teams like Dallas signifies a squandered chance that may come back to haunt them when seeding and home court advantage determined. Most critically, these types of performances foster undesirable habits and a losing attitude that it becomes more difficult to break the longer it is tolerated. To continue, players begin anticipating to fight against inferior competition. They lose confidence at vital moments. They begin to question whether their coaching staff can place them in position to succeed when it counts the most. The time has come for the Indiana Fever. The organization will seriously evaluate whether Stephanie White is right, the individual who will lead this squad forward, because what we see is not a coach who is still learning and growing into the position. This coach has demonstrated the same vulnerabilities consistently, refuses to take responsibility for clear mistakes, and continues to make decisions that harm her team's prospects of winning basketball games.
talent can
Only carry you so far in professional sports, and eventually you will require instruction that improves that talent rather than limiting it due to poor preparation. Questionable game management.
last
Last night's loss to Dallas was only the most recent example of coaching. Incompetence can waste opportunities, frustrate talented athletes who deserve better leadership. Until Fever F, the front office understands that this is coaching problem that requires immediate attention. We're going to keep watching the same film with the same. It was a dismal ending. The players, we deserve better. The fans deserve more. Caitlin Clark deserves to return to team that is actually being coached at a professional level rather than this ongoing calamity that passes for strategic leadership in Indianapolis.